Equine, not just tourists, tourists who care. A guy named Chris Tenove came into our studio to talk about his idea to change the face of tourism and to tell the story of his international, I don't even know the word for this, the international beta test, I guess, that he did of his idea. His idea to remake international tourism is another matter. Chris came up with the idea after a dinner with some family friends who'd just gotten back from New Zealand. But Chris thought, these people are interested in the world. And if somebody could just harness that energy, they could actually do a lot of good.
I guess I really fundamentally believe that there's a lot of good-hearted people with a fair amount of disposable income who would be willing to really engage financially and emotionally with communities that are impoverished. And I thought, how do you get people to engage? And I thought travel. And maybe we can get them there, get them engaged, and do something useful, do something philanthropic. Getting to know people, seeing what life is like, sort of, and developing a kind of relationship or bond with the people there. And then when it's time to go, they would leave a sizable enough amount of money to do some good there. I mean, I bet like $500 would pay for building a school, or it'd pay for anti-malarial medications for a year for the village. And then they'd go home and they'd have this kind of continuing bonds with the people there.
Now, in fact, there already exists something like this. A small movement that goes under various names. Travelers' philanthropy, volunteer tourism, altruistic travel. And so he started talking to experts, aid workers, about this thing that he decided to call philanthropy tourism. None of them had ever heard about the idea either. Now, Chris is a freelance reporter for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. He travels quite a bit. Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Thailand. And as fate had it, Chris actually was headed out to one of the poorest countries in the world, Sierra Leone, for his job. But the impact that this could have on people's lives could be so great, he hoped there just could be some way to do it reasonably. And so, like a doctor in a science fiction movie, he develops an experimental serum and, worried that it is too dangerous to try out the serum on anybody else, he injects it into his own veins first. Chris decided to try out philanthropy tourism himself. He would throw himself into the crucible. Like I said, he was in Sierra Leone anyway. He'd go to a poor village himself, meet the people, and donate some money to see if it could possibly be done without all the pitfalls and problems. It was kind of ad hoc.
Planning? I didn't do much planning. I had planned to plan at some point, but then I found myself in a car going to this sort of isolated village called Tombouctou, and we were about to get there, and I just thought, well, let's give it a shot.
You mean you were going to the village to do interviewing for your reporting?
Yeah. And, we were literally like a few hundred meters out of this village, and I was traveling with the chief's nephew. And I said, when we get to the village, I'd like to talk to the elders, because I'd like to pay for someone in the village who needs a medical operation. And he said, what, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, we'll talk to the elders.
Okay, so you go there, and what happens when you're brought before the elders of a small village?
It wasn't very formal. The chief's nephew knew who to look for, and we stopped by a couple houses and just picked the guys up, and we sort of had this little conference in the back of the car, and they said, well, we know the guy. We'll get him for you.
And what was his medical ailment that he needed an operation on?
Well, it had something to do with a infected and torn scrotum that had been bothering him for a long time, for years. And when I later met him, I could see he was having, great difficulty walking. And so I just sort of said, well, they know who needs the operation, so this is it.
Did you have any sense of if he was trying to get the money together for an operation?
Yeah, well, he told me that morning he'd gone with his younger brother on the trip into a nearby town, and he'd gone to the doctors, and they'd said this is what it is, and they wrote out how much it would cost to pay for an operation, which was the whopping sum of $150, and this was going to take, he figured, about a year-long fundraising to get that kind of money together. And so I came like literally an hour after he returned to the village. And so he told me later, he said, heaven sent you to me. I know you're an angel.
$150, it just seems like so little.
When we got into the car and started bouncing our way back to the nearby town, I finally got the chance to start talking to this man, and that was when things really started to feel right. And actually, we ended up sitting together for a couple hours and just chatting, and he told me about his life, really, and about his grandchildren, and about the day he found a diamond in the pits nearby and was able to build this nice house that later got burnt down by the rebels. You know, talking about his grandchildren and how he wasn't going to be a boring old man anymore. He said once he had this operation, he'd be able to garden again and walk around. And so it was quite touching. It was nice to have got to know him over that afternoon and early evening.
And so his first field test turned out exactly how Chris had hoped it would. And as he traveled, he even met some people in Sierra Leone who saw his vision, who got really excited about the idea of philanthropy tourism.